Darkness has this illusion of making us feel isolated, even when you're not. It tells you a lie that you're alone. And then, with all the negative associations we put with it, we assume that the darkness pulls you down. We think and we focus on what we can't see rather than what we can. But once you let your eyes adjust, like we talked about last week, maybe it's simply a different way of seeing. If we come into the dark, we see something new. A couple phrases to think about. The radiant blackness of night. The stunning darkness. Because once you let your eyes adjust, like I said, you can see, and you don't have to believe that just because things are dark, that you are alone. Or that there's not something brilliantly beautiful to be seen. A call to worship. I invite you to follow along if you like in the text, in the blog link below, or simply listen. During Advent, we are called to settle into the exquisite darkness, to hibernate, to rest and restore. The cycle was given to us at the time of creation. We are invited to face the darkness in our own lives and the world around us. The prophets assure us that the darkness will not overcome us. They call us to watch for the light, notice the light, and be warmed by its rays. We are called to wait, to hope, to trust in promises made. As we make this Advent journey, we claim we come alive in both the light and the darkness. Welcome to this time of worship together. And even if you're watching this all by yourself or even in the dark, this is a reminder that you are not alone and that in the dark there are things to be seen. I invite you to listen as I share some scripture with you tonight. And it's also going to be our poem for this evening because it is a poem from the Psalms, Psalm 139, which is a really beloved one for some people. Once again, I was studying the verses in the Bible that talk about darkness, and I was really hoping to find a psalm, that talks about beauty in the night. And there are some that talk about God kind of folding away the sun and darkness covering the earth like a blanket and those kind of things. But all the uses of the word darkness are pretty negative in the Psalms, except for this one that I found really interesting in this psalm. I'll read to you the first 14 verses of Psalm 139. Lord, you have searched me out. Oh, Lord, you have known me. You know my sitting down and my rising up. You discern my thoughts from afar. You trace my journeys and my resting places and are acquainted with all my ways. Indeed, there is not a word on my lips, but you, O Lord, know it altogether. You encompass me behind and before and lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is so high that I cannot attain to it. Where then can I go to flee from your spirit? Where can I flee from your spirit, or from your presence? If I climb up to heaven, you are there. If I make the grave my bed, you are there also. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand will lead me, and your right hand hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness will cover me, and the light around me turn to night, Darkness is not dark to you. The night is as bright as the day. Darkness and light to you are both alike. Now, these verses are really interesting for how they talk about darkness. Here we have kind of both an acknowledgement of that darkness is viewed as negative, but we have this assertion that darkness is not dark to God. So what is it? If it's not scary to God, maybe it shouldn't be scary to us. We have in this psalm this assurance that wherever we go, God is with us, even to the grave, even to the deep, dark places. So I invite you to think about that if we are going to live a full spirituality, like Barbara Brown Taylor talks about, not just a solar, happy, rainbows and sunshine kind of faith, but one that can live with us even through the dark, then we need to remember this, that God was born in the dark, that God is with us wherever we go. The darkness is not dark to God. I find that in my life as a pastor, sometimes I have this holy privilege that I get to sit with people in the dark, remind them that they're not alone in it. I get to hear some dark stuff. Even though our culture coaches us out of sharing it, it can be really important to do so. It's what's so important about therapy and good professionals. They remind you that you're not alone. That darkness is not dark to them. We need people who believe that. And we have a God who is with us, even in the darkest, darkest places. It's a holy privilege to do just a little bit of that as a pastor, to be here for people in that. And that's what gives me the strength to say, you know what? It doesn't scare me to walk with you into a dark conversation, because the darkness is not dark to God, and I trust that God is with us in it. God is with you. And we can see new things in the dark. And we trust that it'll be morning. There's something beautiful about it. So I invite you to reflect on these things and listen to some Advent music from our music minister, Pat Henry. I want to share with you tonight some powerful excerpts from the book, Learning to Walk in the Dark. That's been the guide for these weeks together. Kind of meditating more on that darkness and what darkness means. I invite you to think back to how earlier I shared some lines from this where she talks about how our negative associations with darkness can be so detrimental, especially for how it consciously or subconsciously casts negative things upon dark skin and darkness and blindness and other such things. So I continue with a few snippets tonight to help us explore that concept of darkness. Barbara Brown Taylor writes, "I cannot remember the last time I heard anyone use dark to describe something good. Fear of the dark has been sanctified in so many people's minds, I have had to define it by my terms, not once but over and over again, because without constant reminders that darkness is not a synonym for moral or spiritual danger, most people I know revert to the equation without even thinking about it. It is as if they have a default setting for darkness in their minds, and that automatically resets every time the sun comes up. In the full light of day, darkness is the most convenient place to store all the shadows, fear of the unknown, anxiety about the future, loathing of our own helplessness, the bottomless dread of death. If darkness really does bring out such phantoms, it is because of the bright distractions of daytime have come to their natural end. When the sun goes down, it is time for another natural thing to happen. The slower, quieter, and more tactile rhythms of nighttime open doors that remain shut during the day. No doubt there are frightening things behind some of those doors, but there are also stunning things. Eventually, with some practice, one learns that all these doors open into the same room. I form light and create darkness, God says through the prophet Isaiah. I make weal and create woe. The way most people talk about darkness, you would think that it came from a whole different deity, but no. To be human is to live by sunlight and moonlight, with anxiety and delight, admitting limits and transcending them, falling down and rising up. To want a life with only half these things in it is to want half a life, shutting the other half away where it will not interfere with one's bright fantasies of the way things used to be, ought to be. She talks about picking up a National Geographic several years ago which had on its cover an aerial photograph of nighttime Chicago with deep darkness and just this brilliant points of light. And she says the theme of the lead story was printed in big black letters that punched holes in the expanse of artificial light. It said, "The end of night, why we need darkness." Inside there was an article about the vanishing night and how our modern life, in our post-industrial world, we have all this artificial light. In any case, it said, the thesis of the article was that the beauty is not the only thing that the night has going for it. Darkness turns out to be as essential to our physical well-being as light. We not only need plenty of darkness to sleep well, we need darkness to be well. The circadian rhythm of waking and sleeping matches the natural cycle of day and night, which affects everything from our body chemistry to our relationships. When we tinker with it, we tinker with the well-being of every creature whose pupils shrink when we turn on the lights. What then shall we make of the human determination to light the night, to shrink the amount of darkness in our lives and our world to the point that all creation suffers from our inventiveness? A couple chapters later, Barbara Brown Taylor goes into exploring what author Miriam Greenspan calls the dark emotions, specifically a number of them that are identified by the DSM-4, the diagnostic manual for psychologists and psychiatrists. In any case, Miriam Greenspan, the author, wondered and was led to explore the idea that the emotions such as grief, fear, and despair and why they have gained the reputation as the dark emotions. Not because they're abnormal or noxious, but because Western culture has kept them shuttered in the dark with other shameful things like personal bankruptcy or sexual deviance. If you've ever spent company in the time of dark emotions, you too have probably received subtle messages from friends and strangers that you were supposed to handle them and move on sooner rather than later. Some of us have even gotten the message that if we cannot do this on a schedule, we may not have enough faith in God. If we had enough, we would banish the dark angels from our beds, replacing them with light angels of belief, trust, and praise. Greenspan calls this spiritual bypassing, using religion to dodge the dark emotions of letting it lead us to embrace the dark angels as the best, most demanding spiritual teachers we may ever know. One of the main things that tip people toward garden variety depression, she says, is a low tolerance for sadness. It is the inability to bear dark emotions that causes many of our most significant problems, and not the emotions themselves. When we cannot tolerate the dark, we try all kinds of artificial lights, including but not limited to drugs, alcohol, shopping, shallow sex, and hours in front of the television or computer. There are no dark emotions, Greenspan says, just unskillful ways of coping with them, with those emotions that we cannot bear. The emotions themselves are conduits of pure energy that wants something from us, to wake us up, to show us something that we need to know, to break the ice around our hearts, to move us. Barbara Brown Taylor describes her own dark period, one of them, and how she found coping mechanisms for it. She said, "When I stopped trying to block my sadness and let it move me instead, it led me to a bridge with people on the other side. Every one of them knew sorrow. Some of them even knew how to bear it as an ordinary feature of being human instead of some avoidable curse. Watching them ride the waves of their own dark emotions, I learned that sadness does not sink a person. It is the energy that a person expends trying to avoid sadness that does that." In a later chapter, Barbara Brown Taylor goes on to explore what theologians have called the dark night of the soul. That is doubt or periods of despair that really make you question God. And what it really does is something else. And here's what Barbara Brown Taylor writes. She said, "I do not believe I am describing a loss of faith in God. Instead, I believe I am describing a loss of faith in the system that promised to help me grasp God, not only by setting my feet on the right track, but also by giving me the right language, concepts, and tools to get the hook in the exact real thing." After so many years of trying to cobble together a way of thinking about God that made sense so I could settle down into it, it all turned to nada. There is no permanent place to settle. I will always be at sea, sailing by the stars. Yet as dark as this sounds, it provides great relief, because it now sounds truer than anything that came before. What if our faith is not a magic switch to turn on the lights and make everything bright and well, but instead it's a guiding star, or it's the confidence to walk in the dark and know you're not alone? I invite you into a time of prayer together as we continue to live in this time of short days and long nights. We pray for what we wish to become shorter and longer. From the rising of the midwinter moon, may darkness and light dance together, O shining God. In this season, make us short on grumpy thoughts, long on sharing words of gentleness. Make us short on being rushed, long on attentiveness. Make us short on seeing what's right before us, long on peering into the horizon. Make us short on our out-of-control to-do lists, long on savoring kindness. Make us short on overlooking the dark sky, long on gazing at the twinkling stars. Make us short on tradition as a habit, long on re-owning and recreating. Make us short on ignoring the hungry, long on making a delicious meal. Make us short on rushing, long on wandering and pondering. Make us short on walking past those sleeping in the cold, long on sharing blankets and hot tea. Make us short on longing for what's next, and long on savoring the darkness. Amen. Question to ponder and take away is, think of all the ways in which you use the term darkness. What emotions do you tend to call dark? Notice how the word darkness is used in people's language this week. A challenge for this week is to think about how the dark places have formed you, and all the ways in which we need the dark. So I invite you as a challenge this week to rest your eyes in the darkness, to think about all the ways in which you relax in the dark and to enjoy it. Live into it this week. A blessing. May the sun, moon, and stars glow on you like a great fire. May you rest and hibernate in the exquisite darkness. May you find new life through God's holy light and holy darkness. Peace be with you this Advent season. Join us for worship in person anytime on Sundays at 8:30 a.m. or 10 a.m. here at Georgetown Lutheran Church.